DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, is a neurotransmitter found in many plant and animal species that, when ingested in conjunction with an MAOI, causes profound entheogenic experiences in which the user is thought to experience God. This chemical admixture is generally thought to have been first discovered by Quechua shaman in the Amazonian rainforests of South America when they combined the MAOI containing B. capi vine, known by the indigenous peoples as the vine of the soul, with Psychotria viridis, which contains DMT in the ritual brew ayahuasca. When asked by Western anthropologists where they came up with the idea to combine these two plants, out of the myriad of species that they could have blended together in the hotbed of creation known as the jungle, they explained that the plants themselves had told them to. Prior to this encounter, Westerners had little experience with the psychedelic tea. When the Spanish and Portuguese conquerors of the 17th century first happened upon the ayahuasca ceremony, they believed it to be the work of the devil, a pagan ritual to be abolished and replaced with Catholicism. On account of this, the ayahuasca ceremony was intertwined with Catholic saints in some regions, much in the same way that curanderismo and Santeria have adopted Christian iconography into their rituals. But had those Western missionaries looked deep into their own holy books, they would have realized that DMT had been there from the very start. Still to come, we'll explore encounters with DMT in the ancient Western and Eastern worlds. Many people believe that the Quechua people of South America were the first to encounter DMT in their discovery of the ceremonial tea, ayahuasca. But the origins of this psychedelic brew have been lost in the annals of history, as these mostly egalitarian tribes lack a written history and do not approach time from the same perspective that the Western world does. Despite this unfortunate reality, archaeological evidence can tell us a bit more of the historical usage of DMT in South America. In the 1990s, a team of archaeologists uncovered a smoking pipe in Argentina made of puma bone that was found to have resin from the yopo bean, a seed pod containing dimethyltryptamine. Radiocarbon dating of the plant material inside gave a date of 2130 BC, meaning that the ritualistic use of DMT-containing plants in South America is at least 4,000 years old. But believe it or not, the interaction between humans and DMT-containing plants probably goes back much further. Up next, did the ancient Egyptians know about DMT? As the existence of DMT becomes more and more a part of the public consciousness, academic circles have begun to examine whether or not DMT had made its mark on the Western world. Already, evidence has come to light to suggest that this is in fact the case. For early examples of dimethyltryptamine use in Western culture, we needn't look any further than ancient Egypt. While the plants used in ayahuasca are not native to Egypt, DMT-containing plants are found literally all over the world. The ancient Egyptians were well aware of at least one of these plants, Acacia nilotica, which they called the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life is displayed prominently throughout Egyptian mythology, appearing in hieroglyphs and even being discovered in tombs that have been unearthed. Clearly, this plant was important to the ancient Egyptians. So important, in fact, that they believed Osiris, god of the underworld, was born beneath an acacia tree. And while the evidence for ritualistic use of acacia by the ancient Egyptians is purely circumstantial, their knowledge of endogenous DMT production was seemingly very sophisticated. It has been well documented that Egyptians routinely performed crude brain surgeries such as lobotomies, but it seems increasingly evident that their understanding of the human brain may not have been quite as archaic as we believe. Ancient hieroglyphs frequently feature this symbol, the Eye of Ra, the Egyptian god of the sun. This symbol was frequently celebrated in temple rituals for its life-giving powers and its protection over the spirit. But let's take a closer look. This ancient symbol looks incredibly similar to the pineal gland, the part of the brain responsible for the endogenous production of DMT, as confirmed by modern scientific experiments. Thought by many to be responsible for dreams, the meditative state, and even the near-death experience, the pineal gland is often known as the third eye, or, as Descartes put it, the seat of the soul. Is it possible that the ancient Egyptians were aware of the significance of this unassuming gland embedded deep in the tissue of the human brain? There's no way to know for certain, but it seems that various cultures throughout the ancient world were most likely peripherally aware of its existence. Up next, the ancient Indian brew that has the academic world stumped. The ancient Hindu Vedas are thought to be some of the earliest religious texts in recorded history. These holy books make frequent references to a beverage, soma, which they strongly praise, going so far as to call it the god of the gods. But somewhere throughout the course of history, the true identity of this plant concoction has been lost. Since the late 1960s, there have been many proposals as to its true identity, from cannabis to amanita mushrooms to ephedra. But could soma have been a DMT-rich brew like ayahuasca? While there are many DMT-rich plants in India, evidence to suggest that the ancient Hindus were aware of it is scant. Or is it? Looking back at ancient Hindu artwork, one can see many commonalities with modern psychedelic art. Could a DMT-rich soma be responsible? What we do know for certain is that ancient India was embedded in meditation. Much of their artwork depicts a bindi, covering the sixth chakra, said to be the seat of concealed wisdom. By altering their breathing patterns to correlate with those found in a trance-like experience, the ancient sadhus may have been able to ramp up endogenous DMT secretion. And soma, whatever it was, may have altered the user's consciousness enough to allow access to these breathing methods, effectively creating the meditative state. It is worth noting that India and Iran developed from the same proto-culture, whose Zoroastrian faith made reference to soma under an alternate spelling, sauma. Early Iranian culture, much like ancient Indian culture, reflects usage of huama, which is believed to be the same thing. Is it possible then that hauma lived on through pre-Islamic pagan rituals, eventually finding its way into Islamic art, like the beautiful ceilings of these ancient mosques, which experts have noted to be very similar to the DMT experience? We may never know, but one thing is for certain. The other Abrahamic religious traditions, Christianity and Judaism, were almost certainly influenced by the use of entheogens like DMT. When we come back, we'll learn more about DMT's place in the Bible. As we discussed earlier, evidence suggests that ancient Egyptians were aware of the significance of the pineal gland and may very well have understood what we now know as DMT. This is the same Egyptian culture from which virtually the entirety of Western culture and the three largest world religions has evolved. Moses, who is equivocally considered a prophet by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, led his people out of Egypt, eventually having a revelation while speaking to a god in a burning bush on a mountaintop. But what was this bush that caused the Prince of Egypt's great epiphany, inspiring him to write the Ten Commandments? Many mainstream scientists at reputable universities around the world now believe that it may have been none other than the acacia bush. the same bush revered by Egyptian culture for having birthed their gods. Could this be a coincidence? One might argue that the desert conditions of Egypt could have caused a wild brush fire, much like the fires that plague the state of California today. If Moses was close enough to one of these bushes, even with their minimal concentration of 1 to 3% DMT, the sheer volume of acacia burned would definitely cause a profound entheogenic experience, allowing Moses to communicate with the wise God in the burning bush. But Moses wasn't the only character from the Old Testament who was seemingly aware of DMT. In one chapter of Genesis, Jacob meets God face to face, wrestling and struggling with him before eventually having his life spared. This is clearly in line with the ayahuasca experience, which many say puts you in the presence of God and allows you to face your judgment. But correlation doesn't necessitate causation. Genesis goes on to have Jacob reminisce on the event. And Jacob named the place Peniel, explaining, "Certainly I have seen God face to face and have survived." Genesis 32:30. And it didn't stop in Egypt. Even the Zeus-fearing pagans of pre-Christian Greece seem to have been aware of DMT, with an elite cult centered upon a mysterious elixir called kykeon, involving rituals, visions, and conjuring of an afterlife. This ritual was held so sacred that in 415 BC, a Greek aristocrat was condemned for taking part in what is known as the Eleusinian Mysteries, in a private residence for recreational purposes. This ancient brew may well have been mixed with an MAOI-containing plant native to the region, such as Syrian rue, and could have been analogous to ayahuasca. This is not as far-fetched as it may seem. It is well documented that ancient Greek physicians used Syrian rue in medicine preparations, and acacia was also well revered and is native to Greece. What's more, ancient Greece saw the inclusion of the pine cone in much of its art, and may be the first culture to do so in world history. The pine cone is thought by many to represent the pineal gland, whose shape is somewhat similar to a pine cone. The same symbol has come to be found in most world religions, and is even visible on the lawn of St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. If this pine cone truly does represent the pineal gland, the early church may have been aware of the significant role it plays in religious experience. Perhaps even in the religious experiences of Jesus Christ himself. Coming up next, we'll explore the role of DMT in Christianity. For almost all of his adult life, Jesus of Nazareth lived as a carpenter, helping his father, Joseph, and by some accounts his brothers, in the family business, as was commonplace in ancient Israel. One day, upon visiting his cousin John in the desert, Jesus had an epiphany and started his ministry, which led to arguably the largest religion in the world. His cousin, an eccentric man, lived on a diet of locusts and wild honey. In many ways, John lived the life of a shaman, performing ritualistic baptisms on people in which he dunked them in the river. It was after such a baptism that Jesus began walking the earth and teaching about God. But the baptisms of ancient Israel were unlike the baptisms of today. Participants were held under the water for much longer periods of time, in which they had to hold their breath. Such an experience, quite likely, would activate the sympathetic nervous system, creating a fight or flight response. When the body truly began to believe it was drowning, an excretion of DMT reserve may have been released, as is believed to happen in near-death experiences. If this is the case, the corresponding ego death alone could have been responsible for Jesus' correspondence with the divine. But after Jesus' baptism, he chose to spend another 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, where food and water were scarce, and temperatures frequently reach extremes. During this time, Jesus is said to have been tempted by the devil, who offered him earthly possessions. Jesus denied the devil before eventually being watched over by angels. If one perceives the temptation of Christ as having happened within the mind's eye, it is likely that Jesus' 40-day fast was responsible for his hallucinations, both of the devil and of the angels. Many contemporary psychonauts believe that fasting can increase endogenous production of the neurotransmitters melatonin and DMT, which were likely responsible for these visions. Matthew 6:22 has been interpreted by some to mean that Jesus may have been aware of the pineal gland's significance in his religious experiences. If your eye be single, your whole body will be filled with light. What's more, some researchers consider the biblical manna, which is represented by the body of Christ in modern churches, to be none other than psilocybin mushrooms. While at first glance this may sound like little more than conjecture, there is evidence in the Bible to suggest that this may be true. Throughout the Bible, manna is said to be a small, round food that was delivered by God along with the morning dew. Anyone who didn't consume their fair share of the sacred gift in a timely fashion would see it go bad and breed worms within a day's time, which is often true of wild mushrooms. When Jesus shared the Eucharist, the bread of life, with his apostles, it was to induce the Holy Spirit as a shared experience of God. The bread of life, of course, was manna. An awareness of this seems to echo throughout the Gnostic sects of the early Christian church until 325 AD, when the Council of Nicaea decided on a concrete framework for the Bible. A framework that would describe less the esoteric ideals of spirituality, and more so establish a dogmatic canon of Jesus' birth, life, and death. Emperor Constantine solidified this by punishing all dissenting points of view as heresy, sentencing their practitioners to death. There is no way of knowing for certain, but this first ecumenical council may be the point in which Christian use of entheogens was suppressed by the Vatican, when it went underground and was carried on in hushed whispers throughout the Middle Ages, to be all but lost to the entirety of Western culture before finally re-emerging several centuries later, but this time within the teachings of an elusive secret organization. Coming up, could DMT have influenced the ideals of the Founding Fathers and even our own Constitution? According to the Hebrew Bible, after Moses wrote the Ten Commandments, he was instructed by God to make a chest in which the Israelites would carry the stone tablets. This gold-adorned chest was made out of the wood of what is referred to in the Bible as the shittah tree, long accepted by scholars as being synonymous with acacia. Later, in the New Testament letter to the Hebrews, the Ark is said to contain not only the tablets on which the Ten Commandments were written, but also a staff belonging to Moses' brother Aaron and a jar of manna. After their exodus from Egypt to the Holy Land, the Jewish people needed a place to keep the Ark, erecting Solomon's temple, in part, as its holding place. Hiram Abif was the chief architect of King Solomon's temple. One day, when the temple was nearing completion, Hiram was attacked and killed by 3 men, who buried his body, marking it only with the branch of an acacia tree. Many believe that these men attacked Hiram in an attempt to get information out of him. When he refused to give up his secrets, he was killed. Is it possible that outside the secrets of his architectural techniques, Hiram had been informed of the secrets of the Ark, or even the identity of the burning bush, by the Israelites? Beyond this legend, too little is known of Hiram Abif's life to grasp what he may have actually known. But the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry traces the origins of their fraternal organization to Hiram, whom they call the widow's son. While many people believe that the Freemasons may have helped to protect and transport the Ark of the Covenant after the destruction of King Solomon's temple, there is no real evidence to suggest that this is so. In fact, for nearly 2,000 years after Hiram's death, there is no written history of Freemasonry. This secret society's history was likely carried on in initiation rites and oral traditions until about the time of the Age of Enlightenment, when written accounts of the elusive fraternity began to surface. Not only is the occult symbolism of Freemasonry littered with references to an all-seeing eye, but amazingly, acacia is said to be the first matter in an alchemical preparation that is part of a sacred Masonic ritual. According to the apprentice and companion's ritual of Count Cagliostro's Egyptian rite, the candidate shall drink the liquid placed upon the master's altar, raising his spirit in order to understand the following speech, which the worshipful master shall address to him at the same time. In essence, one must drink this acacia potion in order to understand the lecture that they are about to partake in. Cagliostro was an Italian mystic whose specific brand of Freemasonry, the Egyptian rite, among others, borrowed elements from the Naqshbandi tradition of Sufi Islam, self-borrowing heavily from pre-Islamic pagan traditions that focus largely on meditation. This sect of Islam views the MAOI containing Syrian rue as the true identity of the burning bush on Mount Sinai. As a result, the Royal Archdegree of Freemasonry went on to make explicit references to this entheogenic plant. This is interesting in that DMT requires an MAOI to be psychoactive orally, as monoamine oxidase, found naturally in the lining of the gut, causes DMT to break down too quickly when ingested. It is the unity of a plant that contains dimethyltryptamine and a plant that inhibits monoamine oxidase that allows ayahuasca and similar brews their psychedelic properties. It is easy to conceive then that Syrian rue may have also been an ingredient in the Mason's elixir. While Cagliostro's ritual goes on to reference an acacia potion several more times, it is not the only reference to the DMT-rich plant in Freemasonry. In fact, acacia seems to be seminal to the organization of Freemasonry. Knowledge of its psychoactive use seems to have been entirely commonplace, at least until the early 19th century, after the death of Cagliostro and other mystics like Russia's Melusino, a practicing chemist. It was during this time that Benjamin Franklin, along with George Washington and, arguably, Thomas Jefferson, were initiated into the Masonic Rite, which begs the question, did DMT play a role in the morality of the Founding Fathers, as it almost certainly did for Moses? After all, much like Moses, the views of our Founding Fathers were considerably progressive for their time. Could DMT have assisted them in their forward-thinking views, like a wide range of psychedelics have for some of the greatest thinkers of modern times? Could it be that the foundation of our entire legal system, the Constitution, was in part the result of the psychedelic epiphanies of these Enlightenment-era thinkers? For every culture and every society that we have discussed, there are countless other instances of the use of entheogens, from Amanita muscaria use in the shamanic traditions of Siberia to Blue Lotus's revered status in ancient Egypt and India. If this much of what we hold sacred, if nearly our entire civilization, is actually rooted in the usage of entheogenic plants, perhaps these ancient visionary tools can help to shed light on our modern world and guide us towards a brighter future for humanity.